The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Warren Ingram, of course, is a certified financial planner at Galileo Capital. I don't know if you had a sandwich for lunch, but there might be times when you feel like you're kind of the filling in the sandwich. And we're talking tonight about a South African sandwich that you see all too often when you have to support your children and your parents. Warren, good evening. I mean, there are many people in this position. Many people are members of families in this position.
And it's it feels like a South African story. We even hear the phrase black tax, and we think it's unique to our country because of our history. But it is something that affects families around the world, and the consequences for families who are in the situation are sometimes very dire. If you look at it's sorry to start on a depressing note, but if you look at the suicide rate of young people entering the workplace, the age group 21 to 35, it's probably the highest grouping in South Africa of people committing suicide. And unfortunately, salaried earners are often, the worst victims of suicide. And it's because of one of the reasons, is surely not the only reason, it's a complex situation, but one of the reasons is the tremendous need for them to try and support their families, and whether it's parents, grandparents, and potentially their own children, and it's sometimes feels like an overwhelming and impossible task that they have to bear, and sometimes very lonely because they find no way out, no one to talk to and no one to help them.
So I suppose let's just talk a little bit about how we got here. I mean, why are we in this position? So we understand our history. Are there particular things that have happened in the last sort of 10, 20 years that have intensified this?
Some of it's, positive demographic trends that are having unfortunate consequences. So one of them is that South Africans in general are having children a little bit later. So where we might have kind of had kids much younger, we now see especially working families having children a bit later, and that's sensible from a financial planning point of view on the one side, but it has a consequence, which is you find parents having to, fund education costs for their children, especially if their children get into tertiary institutions as well, where they're still funding education well into their own retirement. So in the time when you should be accumulating capital, in the last few years of your working career, you're still paying for school and university, and then when you are retired and you've only got expenses and no income, you're in a situation where you're still helping your children to get through varsity, and often help them just survive the first few years of work when salaries are incredibly low. So that's the one thing. The other is life expectancy. It's no secret that we're all living much longer than we did 20, 30, 50 years ago. And that that's great for those of us that can afford to live longer. But if you're funding your parents or grandparents and they're living, instead of passing away or dying at at the age of 70, they're now dying at the age of 85. That's a very long time to keep funding them. And so those two on their own are huge demographic trends which are accelerating. So we are all living longer, and we will live longer, and then we're having children later. So just off the bat, Stephen, those are two of the big ones.
We're taking your questions for Warren Ingram tonight, and I know you'll have them. You might well be a member of the sort of sandwich generation. You might be someone who is being helped by someone in the middle of this sandwich. 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. This must put a huge amount of pressure on the people who are actually earning the salary, Warren. And I'm not just talking about financial pressure. I'm talking about everything. I mean, it's your parents and it's your children. It's the people you love the most, generally speaking.
And very often, add to that, kind of extended family where they're nephews, nieces, aunts, uncles who might be desperately in need of help. And so you're right, the pressure is enormous, and it's not We see it in the consequence, which is financial. We can measure something on the other side, but I think if you talk to psychologists, they'll tell you that this is just incredible pressure. And if you think about yourself as it was a long time ago for me, but as a 21 or 22-year-old self, entering the workplace. And knowing that I could barely, take care of myself, and actually just get up in the morning and get to work, add to that now the pressure of making sure that there is money left at the end of every month to look after your parents, to look after your siblings, and if you've got young children yourself, to make sure that they're getting looked after as well. So entering the workplace is already tough. Just getting a job is hard, and then you add this pressure to it, and the emotional consequences are enormous. And I think it's very difficult to say to somebody, who raised you, look, I need to pay my rent. So the fact that you need food, I'm just going to pay my rent. How on earth does a young adult make a decision like that? And parents, young parents as well, would be saying, I've got to provide for my children. I've got to give them the best education they can get so they can get a start in life. And maybe one broader one, which is, what will people think? What will my family think if I say no, if I can't help? And so there is so much, immediate pressure, and then the kind of wider societal pressure on people in this position. I think it's a tough gig, this.
Yeah. There's quite a lot of social pressure here too, because, we all know who is related to who's part of the Grootes family or whatever. And that can sometimes mean that you kind of feel you need to help out just to make sure that they, that everybody sort of looks in the way they should. Keeping up appearances is a real issue.
It is, and often that broader community did what they could do while you were at school or getting to university to help you and to contribute to your success. And so when you do get a job, and especially if you end up working in a company with a big name that everybody knows, and it doesn't matter what the job is, you could be packing groceries for a retailer, or being a credit clerk at a bank. It doesn't matter what the job is. If you're the first person to enter the formal workspace in your family, the salary that you're earning just seems like this phenomenal amount of money, as if you've won the lottery. And so the expectation, to then get help from you is real. And as you say, very often, your immediate community wants to share in that success and wants to see you achieving. So it's such a complex issue, and we add a little bit of the additional economic pressure that we're seeing in South Africa, where unemployment is not in any way, shape, or form good, and it seems to me, if anything, it's getting worse. So you find people entering the workspace, making a go of it, and then potentially losing their jobs. And so this pressure just continues to build on younger people. Older people generally a little bit more kind of able just to deal with this from an emotional maturity point of view, and maybe a little bit more economic security if they're earning a bit more and have a bit of experience under the belt. But it's the youngsters that start with the workplace that kind of get trapped very quickly.
A reminder, your questions for Warren Ingram, 011 8830702 and 0214460567. Are there some warning signs when actually you're getting in too deep, and this is sort of why? Are there certain moments when you need to realize this is what's happening?
Yeah, I think if you're living in this, it's often, it might be easy for an outsider to see that you've got issues, and might be easy for an outsider to kind of pinpoint where you're going wrong, and it often is a source of shame when you're struggling with money and you can't make ends meet for yourself and then take care of everyone around you. But I think maybe a couple of things that you can just do a kind of a health check for yourself. And one is, if you're borrowing money, so if you're borrowing money on your credit card, on a personal loan or an overdraft, or from a microlender, And the reason you're borrowing that money is to support your family members, let's say older or younger. That's a real red flag for you. That should be kind of warning sign number one. It means that you're already in trouble. You're already in a debt trap that you've got to be very careful that you don't let it get bigger. So I think that's signal number one. Signal number two would be that you're not funding your own retirement, and so if you've decided, if your company allows you to determine how much you retire, you contribute to your retirement fund, and you've stopped contributing to your retirement fund to support family members. And I'm not talking about feeding your own children or just getting, if you're a couple as a husband and wife or spouses that you're just trying to get through the month. I'm talking about when you're supporting nephews, nieces, parents or grandparents, and you're stopping retirement contributions for that reason, to support them, then you need to know that's a red flag. It's maybe not as bad as borrowing money, and then the one which really is scary is when you start using your credit card for family emergencies. When someone phones you and says your niece is going to hospital and she needs help. Can you please get there? And you, the only way you help is on a credit card.
Sure. Are there particular actions you need to take? And particularly just you need to actually sort of try not to nip this in the bud because they're your family, but to try and sort of take preventative or preparatory action to prepare for it?
Yeah, my best analogy I can think of for someone in this situation is when you get on an airplane and you actually take the 2 or 3 minutes to listen to the safety briefing from the airline staff. One of the things they're going to tell you is if there is a problem with the oxygen on the airplane, those oxygen masks will drop out from the top. And they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself and make sure that it is working and that you can breathe before you consider helping anybody else. And to just think about that for a second. So it would be instinctive for someone to look after their loved one first. But if you run out of oxygen and you pass out, then you're not helping anybody, including your loved one. In fact, you become another victim. And so it's not selfish behavior to put that oxygen mask on yourself and make sure that you are able to then, look at the person in the seats to the left or the right of you or in front or behind and say, okay, who can I help first? Who's most in need of help? And if you're able to breathe and you're able to function, yes, you'll be stressed, but if you can then use your resources to help people for as much time as you possibly can. And bringing this back to money, this is the key points to understand. It's not selfish behavior to make sure that you're okay. I'm not saying that, necessarily that you're now going to live a life of luxury, but just looking after yourself, just making sure that you can get through the month, that you're not building up a huge debt pile is incredibly important. Because if you want to be of help to those around you, the loved ones that are important to you, you want to do that for many years, decades if you can. And if you start and you're in a debt problem immediately and you build up credit card and personal loans and all those things, the reality is you're going to be stuck in a huge debt problem yourself, and then you'll be someone in need of help. And you won't be able to help anybody because you'll be stuck in a huge amount of debt yourself. And this is a huge trap that a lot of our South Africans are in. So number one, take care of yourself. Make sure that you are just able to get by. And remember, you can't sacrifice your long-term financial future. If you don't want to be a burden on your children, it means that you have to set aside some retirement contributions so that when they become adults, they're not looking at you and saying, I've now got to help you as well. You should be able to take care of yourself. It's the most loving thing you can do is make sure that you're sustainable, and then you can sustainably support the people around you without becoming a burden on them at some point in the future.
We're taking your questions for Warren Ingram and personal finance tonight on 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. Peter's asking Warren tonight, how much money should I allocate to a potentially risky investment that could grow my wealth quickly? We'll have an answer, Peter, in a moment.
The Money Show. Personal finance with Warren Ingram.
Talking about the sandwich when you're looking after the generation after you and the generation before you financially. But Peter's question from Warren Ingram tonight: how much money should I allocate to a potentially risky investment that could grow my wealth quickly? Warren, I wonder if the answer to Peter's question is, how much money can you lose?
It's a very good starting point to a conversation like this. If you'd asked me this question 10 or 15 years ago, I would have said to Peter, don't waste your money. Don't do this. Rather, allocate it to something very, stable and predictable. The stock market, is always going to be your friend over a 10 or 20-year period. Why on earth would you want to put some money into something very risky? But what I've learned, Stephen, is people don't like that answer because they have this thing called FOMO. They feel like they're going to miss out on the next big thing. And so, if I'd said to Peter in the answer here, don't do it at all, allocate zero, the likelihood is that he'll probably change channels, and we would like him to keep listening. So I think that there is maybe a happy medium, and that starting point is, if you're going to allocate some money to a very risky investment that you believe, you obviously don't just believe in the risk, you believe that it can deliver very good returns as well. Then I think the first point is, if it can go to zero, whatever money you allocate, and if it goes to zero and it's not going to set you back financially, then that's a good measure. That is a starting point. I also think that you probably want to just check your debts. If you're sitting on credit cards, they cost you 25% a year. If you do nothing, your credit card, will double the debt against you within about 3 years. So just think about that, but before you do anything else, Peter. But if you're not in credit card debt and you want to take a punt, and I use that word on purpose, it is really a punt. Then make sure that it's no more than kind of 2 or 3%. And if it goes up 10 times and you allocated 3%, that means you've had a huge jump in your wealth in a very short period of time. And I would say, well done, you've rolled the dice and you were incredibly lucky. But I certainly wouldn't go and take 10 or 15% of my wealth or my assets and allocate it to something that's incredibly risky. Because for me, I can't afford to lose 10 or 15% of my wealth. That would be devastating.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the reason people don't like it is that everyone thinks that they'll get it right, and virtually nobody does.
We always look back, so we'll look at NVIDIA and say, well, I don't want to miss out on NVIDIA's next doubling, and I don't want to miss out on, if it's crypto or whatever the thing is that's doing incredibly well now. And the truth is, those things are always obvious in hindsight. It's obvious that, AI is going to take over the world and NVIDIA is going to be the company that benefits most in the short term. But it's only obvious in hindsight. And so we all are geniuses once, if we want to talk about sports predictions, we're always a genius on Monday morning after the games have been played because we know the results. And it's the same with this. So you need to be very confident that you've done proper research, that you not just looking at the share price or the item's price and what it's done. Do you understand the driver of these things? And if you don't, the reality is you are gambling, and then make peace with that. You're actually taking a punt on something that you don't know very well because other people have taken a punt and they've been lucky, and now you don't want to miss out. And be honest with yourself and whoever else is involved in your life that we're taking a punt with our money and we might be blowing it.
All right, let's just very quickly return to the sandwich conversation where you're financially responsible for yourself, for the generation before you and the generation after you. A part of it, I imagine, is the conversations you have around that, and some of those conversations will almost certainly be quite difficult.
Very hard, and I suspect people are not having these conversations. It's very difficult to sit down and have a kind of a family meeting, which is what I think you should be doing in a situation like this. And, if you're a youngster entering the workplace, show don't be embarrassed to show your family what your payslip looks like. Explain it to them and explain what all the deductions are, how much you've got left over. Show them what you spend on rent and show them what you spend on transport and show them what's left. And then say, okay, so this is what we've got to share. And remember, I've got to eat. I've also got to do certain things. So if you don't want to go to that extreme transparency, the reality is sitting the family down to say, I can afford to help. I can set aside 5,000 Rand a month. That is what I can afford. If you're asking for 10,000, I simply cannot do it. But I think the understanding in a situation like this, it's very awkward, it's very uncomfortable. They might be very upset with you at the start when you say no. But if you just keep saying no without explanation, without some transparency, and without clear budgets and guidelines, we all operate with budgets. It's not a bad thing to say to whoever it is, this is way more than I can possibly afford. I don't earn, the huge salaries. And so if they understand, they can work with it as well. There's a very nice saying, to be clear is to be kind. And I think in this situation, to be very clear, very transparent is important. Set your boundaries and then learn to say no. And yes, you might feel a bit guilty, but when you're still helping those people in 10 years' time, that guilt will have gone away.
We've got 30 seconds left, but part of it might also be choices you make for your children. I mean, we all want to be able to send our kids for a tertiary education. That's expensive. There might be a better way.
I think it's something to look at now to say, if I can't afford super expensive private schools or universities, can I help fund my child, for example, to do an online university, and maybe they study part-time while they're working, they get a part-time job and they study part-time. Is that not an answer? Or can they do a 1-year course where they start earning an income immediately after that course and do something practical? So yes, they might not be, in society with a degree within 3 years, maybe it takes 6. But if they're not in a hole and the family is not in a hole financially, is that not a better outcome for everybody?
Warren Ingram, thanks very much indeed, co-founder of Galileo Capital.